The UN Security Council has finally woken up to the tragedy unfolding in Ethiopia, Africa's second most populous country. Unfortunately, neither Abiy Ahmed, the increasingly isolated Prime Minister, nor the Tigray's People Liberation Front, which ran the country until 2018, are likely to heed the call. Joining us to discuss the latest in Ethiopia is Assistant Professor of History at James Madison University, Mr. Etena H. Dinka. So good to see you again here today on A News. Can you bring us up to speed? I know we speak a lot recently, but these are tragic times. Can you bring us up to speed as where we are right now? What's the latest news coming out of Addis Ababa?
Well, things are escalating both on the battlefront and in the capital city, Addis Ababa. The government in Addis Ababa right now is bombarding multiple locations, particularly civilian locations in the Oromo Special Zone of northern Amhara region. But the government always expresses this and presents this as if it is targeting military bases or any locations that are related to military activities. But reports coming out of particularly the Oromo Special Zone of the Amhara region indicates that the casualties are always civilians. That is what is happening around the battlefront. The Tigray Defense Force and the Oromo Liberation Army in the north have consolidated the positions they have taken weeks ago, and perhaps by now preparing to push further south to the capital city, Addis Ababa. On the other side, the government is taking every Tigrayan civilians from every part of the country and taking them to concentration camps, a very frightening situation, including children, women, and the people as old as 80. Others are taken to the concentration camps.
I was going to ask, actually, that was going to be my next question. I mean, Abiy's government seems to be sweeping the city for everyone remotely linked to the TPLF. Could this, I mean, you're saying concentration camps, so are these concentration camps being set up outside Addis Ababa and people are being moved there? Is that what you're saying, sir?
Yeah, the concentration camps are mostly outside the capital city, Addis Ababa, but initially when people are arrested, they are taken to police stations, and from police stations, they have been transported to concentration camps in different parts of the country. In addition to this, arrests have escalated targeting Oromo civilians, again, in the capital city and around capital city and throughout Oromia. And over the last few days, the government has disconnected particularly the Oromia region from any means of communication, including internet and tele.
Okay, let's just go back to when the government, Abiy Ahmed's government's rounding up these people. I mean, on what sort of knowledge is it? Just by looking at their ethnicity? Is that something that they can do just because you're ethnically Tigrayan, even though you're not supporting the TPLF? Is that grounds to be arrested?
Unfortunately for the government of Abiy Ahmed and his allies, it doesn't matter whether you support or not the TDF, as long as you are Tigrayan by your identity. The government is clarified its position on this multiple times. For example, when the government forces withdrew from Tigray months ago, and defeated in battlefronts, the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed himself appeared in public and described that we withdrew from Tigray into a territory where we have support of our own people, implicating Tigrayans as foreigners or enemies of the Ethiopian state. He presented, and his officials presented, Tigrayans as enemies of the Ethiopian state and enemies of Ethiopian peoples multiple times. This kind of ethnic profiling have been there even before the beginning of the war. The same is true for Oromos. It happened in multiple times, officials of the federal government have implicated civilians, including children who have no any connection with rebels simply because they are Oromo. And that is what is happening right now. Police are indiscriminately arresting whoever they want. And that is now attached to the declaration of a state of emergency. When you ask the police, why are you arresting old man, disabled people, children, women, they say they violated the impositions of the state of emergency.
That just sounds absolutely terrible. I mean, we've been reading also how some people from the United States and from the United Kingdom have also been in Ethiopia because they are, in fact, ethnically Tigrayan, are also being arrested too. Won't this backfire on Abiy Ahmed? Won't this, won't he be held accountable for this? This is surely unacceptable behavior.
It's completely unacceptable behavior. Civilians are always civilians. They live their own life. For example, government civil servants, if you take civil servants working in the government bureaucracy, including in the capital city, Addis Ababa, they lived there for years. They formed families and they are living their own lives, although they are Tigrayans, they are as Ethiopians are anybody else. So the government, unfortunately, looked at the records of human resources in every office, looked at identities of people, and started calling out people, including government civil servants. So the government of Abiy Ahmed should be held accountable for this kind of irresponsible act against civilians. And this is frightening because the rebels are pushing from the north, and the government of Abiy Ahmed wants to use the people in his hands as if as some kind of leverage, as some kind of tool for negotiation. So you can compare this with the concentration camps that happened during the Second World War, and it's really frightening the state of affairs. And the government itself must be held accountable for this kind of approach.
It really is. And talking about accountability, you know, we've been hearing, of course, about the Amhara and Eritrea soldiers who have committed war crimes. I mean, of the rapes, of the of the attacks on human beings. I mean, are we going to see when the dust settles? Will we see people actually being held accountable for this? I know it's a long way away, but do you think there will be any, will anything happen in return to this, or I hope not forgotten about?
Right. Although we are quite far from getting Ethiopia back on track, that is ultimately what should happen. Unless you deliver a transitional justice in some form, you cannot take back the country into peace and stability road. So people who had committed atrocities in various parts of the country, in Tigray, Amhara, Oromia, must be held accountable, including in Benishangul, must be held accountable. One important mistake that was committed in 2018 when the government of Abiy came to office is that both the government and the people thought that it is better to tolerate what happened in the past and take the transition forward without any transitional justice. And that provided an opportunity for people who committed crime to be recruited into the security structure, into the administrative structure of the state, and they got back to their habits of violating human rights. So ultimately, that is what Ethiopia is expected to do once Abiy Ahmed's government is removed and certain transitional government is in place. Transitional justice is a necessity.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope it's without too much loss of life. Etienne Adinka, thank you so much for joining me today here.